It all began on a crisp Friday night, a night that seemed like any other but would soon unravel into a cascade of heartbreak and betrayal. My wife, Stephanie, and I had been married for 8 years. We weren't perfect, but we had built a life together, a home, shared memories, and a bond that, at least to me, felt unshakable. Stephanie was my anchor, my partner, and my best friend. That night, she looked absolutely radiant. She wore a deep blue dress that hugged her figure in all the right places, her hair styled in loose waves that framed her face, and a necklace I had given her on our 5th anniversary. She smiled at me as we got ready for her best friend Alice's birthday party, a smile that I now realize I had taken for granted. Alice and Stephanie had been inseparable since their college days, their friendship weathering the test of time. Over the years, I had attended countless parties at Alice's house. From New Year's Eve celebrations to impromptu summer barbecues, Alice always had a way of bringing people together. Tonight felt no different, or so I thought. As we drove to Alice's house, Stephanie chatted excitedly about catching up with old friends. I listened, nodding occasionally, but I couldn't shake a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. Was it just the monotony of another party? Or was it something else entirely? I brushed the thought aside, chalking it up to a long week at work. When we arrived, the house was already buzzing with life. Music blared from the living room, glasses clinked, and laughter echoed through the rooms. Alice greeted us at the door, her signature drink in hand and a wide smile on her face.
Ben.
Stephanie. You made it, she exclaimed, pulling Stephanie into a tight hug. Her gaze lingered on me for a moment, and she added with a teasing laugh, Don't let her outshine me tonight, okay? I smiled politely, my attention drifting to the crowd behind her. Familiar faces mixed with strangers, creating a lively, chaotic atmosphere. Stephanie seemed to light up in social settings like this. She moved effortlessly from one conversation to the next, her laughter contagious and her presence magnetic. I stayed by her side at first, nursing a drink and chatting with a few acquaintances. But as the evening wore on, we naturally drifted apart. It was somewhere around this time that I first noticed him. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a presence that seemed to command attention. He stood across the room, a whiskey glass in hand, his eyes fixed intently on Stephanie. A smug smile played on his lips, and something about his demeanor immediately unsettled me. I nudged Stephanie, trying to keep my voice casual. Who's that guy? She followed my gaze and gave a small shrug. Oh, that's Ryan. He's a friend of Alice's. I met him at her housewarming last year.
Why?
Her tone was nonchalant, almost dismissive, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about the way he looked at her. Ryan lifted his glass slightly in our direction, and Stephanie returned the gesture with a polite smile. I bit back the urge to say something, reminding myself that I was probably overthinking it. Still, the seed of doubt had been planted. As the night continued, I made an effort to push my unease to the back of my mind. Stephanie laughed and chatted with her friends, and I did my best to focus on the conversations around me. But every so often, my eyes would wander back to Ryan. He seemed to always be lingering on the edges of the crowd, his gaze never straying far from Stephanie. It wasn't until I lost sight of her in the crowd that my unease turned into something closer to panic. I scanned the room, my eyes darting from one group to the next, but she was nowhere to be found. I told myself to stay calm. This was a party, after all. She could be anywhere, grabbing another drink, chatting with Alice, or even in the restroom. There was no reason to jump to conclusions. I approached Alice, who was animatedly gesturing as she recounted a story to a group of guests near the dining area. Hey, Alice, I said, trying to sound casual. Have you seen Stephanie? She paused, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. I think she went to the kitchen a little while ago. She should still be there. I nodded my thanks and made my way toward the kitchen, weaving through the throng of partygoers. The closer I got, the quieter the noise became, as if the world itself was holding its breath. When I rounded the corner into the kitchen, I froze. Stephanie was there, standing at the counter, and she wasn't alone. Ryan was with her, leaning in just a little too close as they talked. His body language was confident, almost predatory, and her posture, while seemingly casual, felt far too familiar. She laughed at something he said, her head tilting back slightly, the sound soft and melodic. I clenched my fists at my sides, a surge of anger and jealousy rising within me. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to step forward. "Stephanie," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Both of them turned to look at me, and I saw the briefest flicker of guilt cross Stephanie's face before she composed herself. "Hey, Ben," she said, her smile wavering slightly. "What's going on?" I ignored Ryan completely, my attention focused solely on her. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" There was a tension in my voice that I couldn't hide, and she hesitated before nodding. "Sure." She set her drink down and followed me back to the living room, where the noise of the party provided a strange sense of privacy. "What were you doing with him?" I asked, keeping my voice low but firm. She frowned, her arms crossing defensively. "We were just talking, Ben." "What's the big deal?" My jaw tightened. The way he was leaning into you, the way he was looking at you, it didn't seem like just talking. She sighed, her expression softening. "You're overreacting. Ryan's just a friend of Alice's. There's nothing going on." Her words did little to ease my discomfort, but I forced myself to let it go. "Fine," I said finally. "Just stay away from him." She nodded, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, annoyance, perhaps, that made me uneasy. For the rest of the evening, I tried to distract myself, but the tension between us lingered. And then, just as I was starting to feel like things were returning to normal, Stephanie excused herself to get another drink and never came back.